Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss everything related to women's basketball player development, the collegiate recruiting process, and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guest today is Coach Christin Gowan. Coach Gowan has experience as an assistant coach at California State University-Stanislaus and Occidental College in Los Angeles, and experience as a head coach at Southern Vermont College. Coach Gowan just finished up her 6th season as a head coach at McDaniel College. Coach, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just jump into it. Let's say you're at an AAU tournament, which I'm sure you've been to at least a couple already so far this year. But what's the first thing that you notice about a student athlete?
Their attitude, demeanor, and work ethic. I think those are the things beyond skill that kind of pop out. You know, it's sometimes hard to see even a player maybe get touches throughout a game, especially an AAU game. We might only be watching for a half. So I'm more watching those intangible things that are outside of their control. How do they react when a call goes against their team? How do they react when their coach is giving them feedback on the floor? How do they bounce back after they make a mistake? So it's really that body language piece, because I feel like that's something you can't really fake. So I think that gives me a little bit of insight into the person beyond the skill piece. Especially when they might not even touch the ball. If it's a post player, they might touch the ball 3 or 4 times in a whole half while I'm watching. So I've got to watch all the other body language, demeanor stuff, and how they react when things aren't going their way.
Yeah, I love that too. And that's something that actually coaches haven't really explicitly said when I've asked that question, but it makes complete sense. Like you're watching a half or you're able to watch, 5 minutes, 10 minutes because you're going to another court. What can you actually see and assess in that time?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a perfect thing too, because somebody could be having a bad day. Maybe they react wrong in that moment. But I feel like for the most part, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So yeah, that's like a really good picture of who that athlete is, regardless of if they hit a shot or not, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes that is hard for us too, is recognizing that we're only getting a 10 or 15 minute snapshot of a player. So if they are having a bad day and they do have a poor reaction, that's really tough. Especially at our level, though, we're recruiting in mass. We're watching hundreds of players at these recruiting events. So if there's a player who's reacting poorly and responding in a negative way, we kind of have to move to the next person because there are so many people to evaluate. So it's tough, right? Because that person, that moral person inside of me is thinking, oh my gosh, what if I just caught him in a bad moment? But then the other side of me is like, if that's a bad moment, how often do they have bad moments, right? And so it puts a lot of stakes in the way they act and the way they behave, but it's things that they can control, which is really important to me. You can't control if you're going to hit the shots. You can't control if you touch the ball. You can't control if you make a bad pass, but you can control how you react to those things. So I think that's really what I put a lot of stock into.
Yeah, that makes total sense. If we were to talk a little bit about skill too, because I get a lot of people asking me about like very specific skill questions. What are 1 or 2 things that you expect a guard to be able to do before they can step foot like in your practice first day?
It seems so fundamental and so rudimentary, but they have to be able to make a post-entry pass. I mean, I feel like the back to the basket game has kind of shifted away, especially, at the high school level. Everybody wants to play 5 out. Everybody wants to shoot threes. But being able to get the ball to a post player when they're open and available in that short window, it's a lost art. And it's something that not a lot of players do. They don't focus on it. So being able to make that post-entry pass is huge for us, because if you can get us the ball 4 feet away from the basket to one of our best, most efficient scorers, that's going to put you a step ahead. So a great post-entry pass, and then being able to handle ball pressure. So when someone's up trying to turn you in the backcourt, when they're really pressuring you, can you keep your eyes up? Can you handle the pressure and kind of escape and then make a good play out of that, instead of maybe dribbling into trouble or picking up the ball? You've got to be able to handle that pressure when people are coming at you, or maybe a little bit more athletic than you and they're kind of chasing you down. Can you use your skill set and your basketball IQ to get the ball and escape out of that?
Yeah, I think passing in general is just something that is maybe overlooked a lot. And even because I was thinking about when you said that about a post-entry pass, I thought, okay, well, if I'm an athlete, a guard, maybe they might say, well, I don't have any good post players, right? Or, whatever. But at the same time, I'm sure if you're a good ball handler, your coach puts you in, ball screen situations. And that type of pass, I think, is very similar to a post-entry pass because it has to be on
Yeah.
time. It has to be exactly where the player needs it to be. So, like, that would be my recommendation if you're like, I don't have any post players that post up. It's like, okay, well, then focus on that type of pass because I feel like that will translate more than other things.
Yeah, certainly that little pocket pass.
Yeah.
Because it is that pocket pass is really similar to, maybe fake high and go low on a bounce pass. And I also think, people might use that reason they don't have post players to throw the ball to. But you also, get a parent or a friend out there, have them stand on the block, right? Fake a pass high, wrap it around and go low. I think passing's not flashy, at times. I think passing's not exciting and exhilarating to work on. But as a point guard from college, there is nothing better than hitting your post player with a perfect dime. They can catch it. You set them up to score. I think that's the most fulfilling thing as a guard. So it might not feel flashy to practice, but it sure feels good in the games.
Yeah, when you see 2 points or when it's like ends the quarter or wins the game or something, that definitely feels pretty good. So then
Yep.
let's talk about post players too. Maybe one or two things that you expect from post players on the court.
Uh, I think expect is a tough word because
Okay.
expecting them to come in, right? Because I think recognizing that people have different levels of development when they come in, I expect them to be open to being able to finish with both hands, right? They might not be super efficient with their offhand right off the bat, but being willing to work on that. That's something that you can really practice as you're finishing, and that you can grow exponentially in that, especially in just your first year in college. So even if a post player coming in really is one right hand dominant, maybe they were 6 inches taller than everyone in their league. So they could go up right every single time. They didn't really have to do with left hand. I'm not going to penalize them for that, but I want them to be open to really developing that offhand in the off season. And then being willing to be physical. I think that is a huge difference between the high school game and the college game is the physicality in the post. And so being able to body up and really use your shoulders and be confident in taking contact and then being able to finish strong through that is really, really important. I know that I was just recruiting last weekend, and that was one thing that I put down. Anytime I saw a post player gather the ball, power dribble, and body into somebody, I'm like, that's somebody I want on our team, because then you can grow from there. So I think being willing to use both those hands and then being willing to be physical, those are two things that are necessary at the next level. So if you do them as incoming freshmen, then that's going to put you a step ahead as well.
Yeah, and I want to highlight something that you just said about what like this is actually something that you did last weekend, right? Like this made you write somebody's name down and you did not say somebody who scored 20 points or somebody who even finished those shots. It was just
Mm-hmm.
somebody who was willing to be physical and who you saw that in them because it's like you said, we can work on the other stuff. We can work on making your
Mm-hmm.
finishing more efficient, but do you have the desire to want to be physical? Because that isn't always the case.
Yep, absolutely. That's the hardest transition sometimes for post players when they come in, I think, and they're not used to being physical. Every time they get touched, they feel like they're getting fouled, and it's a whole different game. It's almost like when you get to college at flip flops, right? In high school, the guards on the perimeter, they're really physical. You're getting hacked coming up the floor. You get touched constantly at the high school level, and then you get to college, and as soon as you put an open hand on a dribbler, automatic foul, right? So in college, at the perimeter side, you can't get touched as a guard. In the post, it is mayhem down there. I mean, people are getting hacked, they're botting up, but it's reverse in high school, right? You get barely touched in high school, it's a foul down low. In college, I mean, you got to take somebody's arms out to really draw a foul there. So I think that switch is tough for both ways, converting into college. But yeah, I think that desire to really want to be physical and be willing to be physical is huge.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because I've seen around where I live, I've been to like some high school games and stuff, and I'm just like, man, these guards, they are doing them a disservice because they are fouling the whole length of the court. It's like their arm is over there and they're over here now. It's insane. But then like you said down low, it's just like very quick whistle. So how might a student athlete know if a coach is interested in them or not?
I think there's two ways. One way is being responsive. I think when coaches get back to you, if you're sending them emails or, reaching out to them on social media, or if you have their number and you guys have texted because you've talked before, I think getting responses from coaches really indicates interest. But that could also be, if they're just really diligent and they write back everybody, that could be the case. So then beyond that, if they're showing up time and putting in time at your games, I think that's really important because that time is money, right? Like we have a finite amount of hours in a day. There's so many tournaments and games to go to. So the coach is investing that time to come watch your game. there's a little bit of interest there, at least even they're evaluating you still, right? They're coming and it's not a no. So if a coach is showing up to your games and putting in time, I think that definitely indicates interest because there's no better way, right? Time is like the one finite resource that we can't get more of. So if that's what the coach is choosing to do with that hour during that AAU tournament or that half hour or half, I think that shows a lot.
Yeah, and when might it be a good idea, in your opinion, when might it be a good idea for a student athlete to kind of move on? So and I'll give more context. So let's say they're really interested in the school and they're not really sure when might it be time for them to move on?
I think if you feel like the coach isn't quite as responsive, I can only really speak to my experience. I know I've heard from, student athletes sometimes that a coach isn't really getting back to them. If I know I'm recruiting somebody hard, texts don't go unanswered, emails don't go unanswered. If that's somebody who I really, really, really want. I think that sometimes we get inundated as coaches with emails. Sometimes, especially before an AU tournament, I might get 30 emails the night before with, hey, here's my schedule. I'm playing this weekend, and they send me all this stuff. And we might have already built our schedule the day before. So it's too late to go back and add everybody. We can try to make some adjustments, but it might be hard. And so, we could still really be interested in a player, but they sent us their schedule at the last second. So then it might be really tough to make that adjustment. But I think having a transparent conversation with the coach is, hey, coach, I just want to find out kind of where I stand. Am I in your top 10? Am I in your top 5? Do you have other people in front of me? I mean, just be direct, and then be willing to hear the result if it's not really what you're hoping for. I think that at McDaniel, when we have student athletes that are really interested in the school, they love the fit, and we have great academic programs, and they love the area, and they feel like this is where they want to go no matter what, but we don't have a spot for them, then we always encourage them to try out for the team in the fall. Anything could happen over the summer, right? Like there could be injuries, players could decide to transfer, or we could say they come out and they just blow us away. They work on their game all summer, and now we see, okay, maybe we misevaluated them in the spring and they are good enough to be on our team. And so we have had players walk on and come to McDaniel and try out and make the team in the past. And so I think recognizing that it's a blunt conversation you have to have with that coach if you're not feeling it, right? If you're feeling good, you can still ask the questions. That's great. I'm sure the coach would be happy to answer. But I think that having that blunt conversation is really important. From my standpoint, I try to be really transparent because I don't want to string anybody along or people put their eggs in one basket. They're really excited about our school. We had, just this past weekend, like I said, we had, let's say, 100 players that we watched. And so there was probably 10 of them who reached out to me following the tournament. I reached out to them and let them know, hey, based on our needs, we already have some commitments for 2026. And based on our roster that we still need, we need some post players. There was a few guards that we said, hey, you don't really fit what we're looking for. It's no knock against you. It's just we need different positions for this upcoming season. So I let them know right off the bat. That way they don't have to count on us maybe coming to games or they were really interested so they can kind of move forward with that process. But I think transparency is key. I think that's something really important. It's a difficult conversation to have. I might not have had that conversation when I was a first-year head coach 10 years ago. I might not have been as willing to say, hey, we're not recruiting you anymore. But for us, I want to be transparent so those players have a chance to move on and kind of focus on the schools that do have interest in them. And so I think asking questions is really, really key. And any coach that has your best interests in mind is going to be transparent back with you.
When should an athlete send you their playing schedule for, an upcoming tournament?
Yep. So I would say as soon as you get it, right? Because we're always checking, but there's always adjustments. But, I'll just use the tournament at Spooky Nook that happened last weekend. So as soon as you get your team schedule and you've already been in contact with us, shoot that over to us, right? And so we have a master list where we're adding everybody's schedules and making sure we can see everybody play at least once. And so sending that schedule as soon as you get it is huge, but then making sure that you keep in mind if there are adjustments to that schedule, right? So maybe you got a last minute game change, whether it's a court or a time. We don't get those updates for every team, right? If we went to recheck the master schedule, we don't really do that. We make an Excel sheet and we have our schedule planned out. So sometimes that's tough if we plan to come see you play and then your game wasn't at 8 p.m., it got moved to 7 p.m. and we missed you. And so it's like, oh, now there's not another time because we're already so full. So as soon as you get your schedule for the tournament, send it to the schools you're interested in. And then if there's any changes, be sure to update the schools that you've already reached out to, right? Because they might have already planned to come see you play. And then one other recommendation that I would plug is if you send a game schedule for your team and you're going to miss one of the games, make sure you tell the coaches that. We had that happen to us before where we go on Friday and then the player's not there and we say, hey, we came to your game, you weren't there. They said, oh, I had school on Friday, couldn't make it. That would have been great info to tell us beforehand so that we could plan, right? Because we plan to see certain teams on certain days and certain times. So I think that it's really important that players communicate about if there's adjustments to their schedule. But I would say as soon as you get it, send it to the schools you've been in contact with and you're interested in. I don't think just posting it on your Twitter or your social media is enough because I don't know if coaches can really go through and pull schedules from every person. I think a personalized email to the schools you're really interested in is probably more impactful and a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, like you said, a little bit more impactful because it actually shows a little bit of interest and it makes your job easier too. And coaches love it when people make their jobs a little bit easier, right? Because you say you have so many emails, you're creating this master schedule. There's only so many people on staff who are going to be at that specific tournament to be able to assess people. So it's really, really important that, like you said, if you might play all weekend, but they plan to see you Friday. And if they don't see you Friday, they're not going to see you. And then it's going to have to be until the next tournament or whatever it is. So yeah. And that's something that's completely within your control as well. It's like, just let me know. And then you can adjust and try to figure it out.
Communication is key. I think that that's something really important. And it shows a lot about the player and their communication style also when they recognize that there's a change and they think the courtesy of, oh, I've told my coach I'm playing at this time. We're not playing at this time anymore. Maybe we should adjust. I actually have a sophomore on our team now. I went to watch her team when I was in Louisville at Run for the Roses one year, and she wasn't there. And so I went back to another game, and I noticed she wasn't there again. So then I texted her at the end of the night, and I said, hey, I didn't see you play. Are you not with your team? Did you not come to Louisville? Is everything okay? And then she was so apologetic, said, Coach, I'm so sorry. I'm actually hurt. I'm going to miss the remainder of the season. She was so mortified that she forgot to tell me. And so I thought, she has so much empathy right now. She feels so bad that I went to watch her team and they didn't show up. So that clicked in me that she's really interested in us. She just made a mistake on her communication on the front end. And so for me, that showed that she really, really cared about people and their time, even though it was a miscommunication. And I ended up watching her team play a couple times without her there. I could tell it meant a lot to her that she felt so bad that I had went to the game and she wasn't there and that she didn't communicate she wasn't playing the rest of the summer. And so that, like, even though I didn't get to see her play, I'd already seen her play in the past. I knew that she was really interested in McDaniel just from that response. And I also knew she cared about people from that response. So that little interaction showed me a lot about her as a person. And now she's on our team here. She's going to be a rising junior next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's like mistake response in real life terms, right? All right. So let's flip it on the other end. What indicators might you use or when might you start to move on from a student athlete?
The communication piece. I think when we reach out to student athletes and we don't get any response early in the AAU recruiting season, so in the springtime, we might reach out a couple times, and it depends on how the initial contact was made. So if a player reached out to us first, right, they send me an email and say, hey, coach, I'm familiar with the program. Maybe they know somebody who went here, or they're from the area, or they know the Centennial. That tells me they're interested because they did the legwork, right? They went and looked up my email. They show that they're a little bit interested in the school. They've reached out to us directly. So that indicates to me that they're a little bit interested. So I'll put a little bit more time with those players up in the front end because I know they're interested in us in the first place. There's other players that you go to tournaments and you've never spoken to before, but you're evaluating, and then you reach out to them after the tournament's over. I can't even imagine. I've been out of college for a while. I feel like the internet barely existed when I was playing. I sent my game film out on DVDs, if that puts it in perspective. But I can't imagine how many emails players are getting from. I'd be interested to hear actually how many emails players get from teams after, like on the Monday after a live period. Do they get 10 emails? Do they get 50 emails? Right. So I don't take it that personal if a player hasn't responded early in the summer, right, or in the spring. I'm going to continue to reach out to them. I'm going to keep watching them play. If I liked them and they haven't responded back yet, I might go watch them again and send them another email right after that tournament ends. I might say, hey, I watched you play at Spooky Nook and now I watched you play in Atlantic City. Really like your game. I'd love to talk to you. So I'll give it, 2, maybe 3 chances because I don't know how many emails they're getting, right? They could just be swamped. They could think, oh, I don't want to go to a D3, so they're not really responding to D3s yet. And so maybe at the end of the summer, they decide that maybe D3 is a better level for them. And so they might respond way later. So I give a little bit of grace in that early spring and early summertime. If they haven't responded to me all summer, they're probably off my list. Like if they've never responded to anything, that indicates to me they are never interested, and that's okay, right? We recruit a lot of players. I've sent a lot of emails, and players go on to go to different schools, higher levels. There's a variety of reasons why people choose other schools, so I don't take it personal. But I think once a player stops, once we've been in contact, maybe we've set on a Zoom, maybe they've come on campus for a visit, maybe we've texted off and on. Once they stop responding consistently, that's a pretty good indicator to me that they're not interested anymore. They might not, I feel like most teens these days are on their phones. So if I send you a text and I don't hear back for a week, I'm like, whew, you left me on red. That was tough. That was tough. So especially it's someone that I've talked to a lot before, right? If we've had like good conversations, I've been to their high school games, I know their families, and they stop responding to me, I'm like, it's a pretty good indication they're moving on, which is totally fine. It would be easier if players, when they knew we were off their list, to just say, hey, coach, just want to let you know I'm going to go with a different school. And I do get those texts a lot. Players are pretty good about that, letting me know. But then sometimes I think players might be pulling schools along, hoping for maybe something different, or they're waiting for a different option. Maybe you're option 5 and they're kind of waiting for 1 through 4. So they're kind of, I'll respond back, every 5 days or a week or whatever. But to me, if I'm texting a player and they take 3, 4, 5 days to respond back to me, that tells me they're probably not that interested in our program. One, because they're not, timely in their response, but 2, we also want people who are really good communicators on our team, right? And so if somebody takes 5 days to respond back every time you reach out, that's probably indicative of how they're going to be when they get to campus and it says, hey, you need to fill out this medical paperwork. Is it going to be 4 or 5 days before they get it done? Are they going to sign up for an academic meeting when you tell them to, or are they going to be late on it and wait 2 or 3 days? So I think those behaviors are kind of indicative of how they might act later. And so just being timely in the response is huge. And so that's when I know to move on, is when they're not really giving me the time of day anymore. They kind of like break up with me. I'm like, it's okay. Time to go the next way.
For the athletes that I talk to, most of what the things that we talk about and work on is that self-leadership piece of, are you going to communicate in a timely manner? Are you going to, show up when you say you're going to show up? Do you do the things that you say you're going to do? Can you commit to that? Because sometimes it feels like they just don't know. Like they've never had anybody hold them accountable or hold the line on certain things. So they just think, oh yeah, like, oh, I didn't hit them back. It's been a week, but that's okay. I'll get back to them when I get back to them. And then they forget or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they are interested, maybe they're not. But it's like sometimes nice to just have that little extra push from coaches. I'm talking more so like high school or AAU coaches to say like, you should respond.
Mm-hmm.
If this coach is interested in you, like you said, ghosting is never okay.
Yeah. And I think it probably goes both ways too. There's probably college coaches who do the same thing, right? Who don't really respond in a timely manner, and I've missed texts too before, we get a lot of texts. I might be on a flight or something and I get back, I'm like, I'll respond to that when I get home. And then all of a sudden it's been a couple weeks and I'm like, oh no, they're going to think I did, we've all made those mistakes, I think. But I think not being afraid to communicate what's going on too. Sometimes I fear that student athletes might have other stuff going on. And so it's a big mental load to say, oh my gosh, this college coach wants to talk right now, but I have a test coming up, or I have a game tomorrow, or I have this, like, I just don't have it in me right now. Maybe we can circle back in the weekend, and then it slips through. If that's the case, like, I would love if I text play, hey, how's it going? Just want to catch up. And they wrote back and were like, coach, going good. I'd love to chat. I got a lot going on. Can I talk to you this weekend? Right? Just like shoot me a quick one. And then that weekend I can say, hey, just circling back. Is everything good? And then I'm able to kind of follow up with that conversation. What I don't want to do is text them, they don't respond, and then I have to text them again and they don't, because then I feel like I'm harassing them, right? I'm just like not leaving them alone. And so I think that if an athlete is true, like if they're busy, they've got a lot going on. I think high school is probably one of the busiest times of their lives with all the extracurriculars and academics and college searches going on. If they're busy, just tell me, just tell the coach, like, I've got a lot going on, coach, can we set up a call next week, or can I text you next week or something like that? Because then the coach knows too, like they make a mental note, I can reach back out to them a week, maybe when things have slowed down for them a bit.
Yeah, and I feel like the best thing that's happened, at least for me, is if this person has an iPhone, but the ability to send a text later has been like the best thing, because it's something like you said, they can even schedule a text to be like, oh, okay, like I don't want to respond to this right now, but I want to respond or whatever, or can I respond to you this weekend, and then just like schedule it for when, so you don't even have to think about it.
Yep.
That is something that is like I found super helpful, and I feel like utilized in the right way, an athlete could find that really helpful as well.
Yeah, certainly.
What skills, on court skills, do you find yourself having to teach a lot once athletes get to you?
That's a great question. Um, I think it's different for every player. We recruit a gamut. I think sometimes you watch a team and you're like, there's a type of player that goes there, right? They look the same, they play similar, so they're probably teaching the same skills. Our team, is vastly different. We have so many players that bring different things. We have small guards, we have big guards, we have like built post players, we have really scrawny post players. So everybody's a little bit different. I think in general, things that we have to work on, like I mentioned before, ball handling with pressure. I think that is something that, we don't want them to dribble into trouble, but when they feel trouble, we don't want them to panic. So that is big for posts and guards, right? Because your fours, they help break the press. They might be the one getting the reversal when they're getting the ball out of bounds. And so for us, having people who are confident with their dribble and confident under pressure, I think that's really big. Um, Finishing through contact is big. Like I said, you're getting hacked down there. There's a lot of body contact once you get into the paint. Players are used to in high school. You take a little contact, you fall to the ground, automatic whistle. Doesn't really happen at our level. It's really hard to get a call. So being able to finish and absorb that contact and be able to finish with both hands, I think is really crucial. And then I think another piece that we work on with everybody is shooting on the move. There's a lot of great high school shooters that are set shooters. They can stand in one place, they catch the ball, they let it go, they shoot a really high percentage. Very rarely in the collegiate game is someone standing still, catching a ball, shooting a wide open three. You've got someone running at you, you've got to come off a screen. So really running off staggers and being able to shoot off the move is huge. Because if you can run off a screen well, you can get open no matter what, right? So if you've got a team of good screeners, you got people who can hit you on time on target with a pass. If you can catch and shoot it on the move, you're going to be really, really hard to guard, right? And so focusing on that is a big piece for us because our offense requires a lot of movement. We run the Princeton offense, so there's a lot of times that you're not standing still very much. And so getting players comfortable moving while they're shooting, I think that's something players don't do that often right now. I think there's a lot of stationary shooting going on, which if you watched our games, I think the only time someone's stationary shooting might be during a foul shot. I don't think it happens very often. So that is a huge piece, and I think that's just a different level. Because in high school, you can get away with it. You can stand on the perimeter, somebody drives, they kick it out to you, you're wide open, you're good to go. In college, it just doesn't happen that much.
I would, yeah, 100% agree with that, and that's at any level, right? All right, let's move a little bit towards the transition from high school to college. In an ideal world, what would an athlete's summer look like before they get to McDaniel?
So when they're an incoming freshman?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we want them to work on their skill set. We have generic workouts that we provide to our players. And then the returning players, we give them a little bit more tailored based on their skill set going into the summer. So working on their game as much as they can, and working on those things we just talked about, their ball handling, their finishing with contact, their passing, very simple things, right? These are basic skills that aren't flashy, but things that'll set you apart. And then the level of fitness is huge. So one, people don't always have access to a gym, right, where they go, or they don't have any foundation for strength training. Not every high school program does some type of strength training. And so we recognize that coming in their freshman year, we're imagining all freshmen have a level of 0. They have no foundation of lifting. If they do, that's a positive. But we come into it thinking we're going to have to teach them from the ground up. We do a lot of Olympic lifts. We do a lot of plyometrics. We try to be really explosive. And so for the strength piece, we don't really worry about that coming into their freshman year because we feel like we're going to develop that once they get here. But we want their fitness to be really good. We want them to be fit and be able to run up and down. It is a cheat code to be in great shape. If your brain works so much faster when it's clear, when your body's not trying to survive by getting oxygen because you're out of shape. So that to me is really indicative of a player who worked hard when they can come in and they're in September and they're in great shape and they can run up and down the floor and play at the pace we want to play at. It's easier to absorb the physicality because you're not trying to gasp for air. It's easier to process the plays because your brain is more clear because you're not trying to gasp for air. You're not in an oxygen deficit. And so for me, like going into that freshman year, being in really, really good shape, being able to get up and down, sprint the floor, run your lanes, because then it helps you process the information, right? The game is faster at the collegiate level. So if you're in really good shape, it's a cheat code. Like your body is just, it's so much easier for everything else on the floor to happen if you don't have to worry about your actual physical conditioning. So for us, that piece is something players can control. They can go outside and run. They can go to their local park and run. They can run sprints on the basketball court at home, at their local YMCA or even a park outside. There's always a place someone can run. For skill work, they might have varying levels of access to a gym. Maybe they have a shooting machine at their high school they can use. Maybe they don't. So that's going to vary. And then again, the strength piece, we're going to worry about their resistance training once they get here. So we'll give them a workout if they're comfortable, right? Because some players do have a base level there, but we're not worried about that development. We're worried about their in-shape conditioning once they get here and their physical fitness.
Yeah, being in shape, being fit can hide a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm. I think it's easier to give that extra effort when you have the capacity to do it, right? You make a mistake defensively. If you're in really good shape, you can recover it and you can sprint out and go, maybe sprint to the help side on the other side of the floor. You can get back on defense. Even if you make a turnover on offense, if you're in great shape, you can sprint back, beat them on the floor. Maybe you make them cause a turnover or take a charge or something like that. So I think, yeah, you have the ability to recover faster when you're in really good shape. And that, again, is something that is completely within your control. I had a player come back between, I think, her sophomore and her junior year, and she got in incredible shape between the 2 years. She was in decent shape before that. But between her sophomore and junior year, she came back and she said after like our first week of practice, she told me everything is so much easier because she's in great shape. She's like, I didn't realize how easy the drills were when you're in great shape. I didn't realize how easy practice was when you're in great shape to begin with. She's like, I feel like everything is so much more clear to me. And I'm like, yes, exactly. You figured it out. Tell your teammates.
It's not a secret. Mm-hmm. Tell everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is what I was going to say. And I feel like the risk of injury goes down too.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are, like you said, you are in good shape. You're more solid. You're able to, cut a little bit harder. It's usually when you're like tired or a little bit looser where injuries tend to happen and is like a lot of fatigue, especially if you haven't done much and then you try to run into 6 days of practice
mm-hmm.
that are going to kick your butt. Like you're going to be sore and it's not going to be good.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I also want to say this because I had a conversation with somebody actually yesterday, a young athlete who is like her mobility is really poor and she's in a lot of pain, is like recovery and stretching is super important too.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't move well, or if you can't like bend down and touch your toes, that's going to affect how you perform on the court as well, because then you have less range of motion to work with and you're going to be that much less effective as well.
Yeah, and I think the risk for injury is probably significantly higher as well if you're not flexible, right? Because that's when you land funny, mm-hmm. your muscles can't adjust, and then that's when, maybe a ligament tears or something like that. So yeah, that's definitely something that they can improve too, right? You're sitting at home watching TV with your family, get a couple stretches and get a foam roller going. I think that it's easy to add those little teeny tiny habits that could make a big difference.
Yeah, huge difference. All right, so I have a last couple of questions that I ask all of the guests. What book or podcast would you recommend every incoming first year read or listen to before their first season begins, and why?
So Mind Gym is one of my favorite books all time, like Mind, GYM, like gymnasium. So Mind Gym.
Yeah.
And by Mark Gary. And so that's one of my favorites because it talks about mental toughness and inner excellence and the things that you can control in your own mindset. And I remember reading it in high school. My JV basketball coach gave it to me when I was, 14 years old. And so for me, it stuck with me all this time. And I still give it to my players now to read. I read it again in college. It really focuses on your mindset and how much impact that can have on your performance in your game. And what separates those elite athletes that we think of between, the really good athletes, it's their mindset, right? They talk about Mamba mentality. You talk about, with Jordan and the things that he did, Caitlin Clark, Diana Taurasi, like they are so locked in mentally. And I think that was an awesome read. Just thinking about the power that had when I was, in high school, thinking about, oh my gosh, if I really focus on this, it's not physical. It's not something outside of my control. It's something I can lock in and practice and take mental reps the same way you take physical reps. And so that really had an impact on me. So that's a big one that I would recommend everybody read.
Yeah, I love it. I just jotted it down because I don't know if I've heard of that one, so I'll have to check it out. And if you could snap your fingers and change one thing or create like one rule for the recruiting process, what would it be and why?
I think for the recruiting process, the thing that I wish would change about it is that it wasn't commercialized. I think that there are people who have taken advantage of players really wanting to play basketball or any sport at the next level, and they've made it into a business, um, which I don't think there needs to be a business for student athletes to find the right fit for them. And so the way that parents and families are spending maybe $1,000 to go to an AU tournament over a weekend, I think that it's absurd the amount of money that families are costing up front to pay for these events or recruiting services. I don't recommend those at all. I think that personal emails do more than, I get maybe 20 emails a day from like recruiting services that I'm sure families are paying a lot of money to have, but they're emailing every coach in the whole country the same blurb. And I know a kid from Wyoming isn't coming here. And so it's delete, delete. It's, to me, that's not personal interest. And maybe that works at other levels or other schools. But for me, I feel like if you're interested in schools, you can do it on your own. You don't need to pay for a service to do that. And so the fact that families, I feel like, have almost been tricked into needing to spend all of this money to pay to play, I think it's really a disservice because at the end of the day, the most important thing is finding your right fit. I don't think those services or those tournaments that are upcharging are helping you find the right fit. I think you can do that without any of that. We have players on our team now that didn't even play AAU basketball. They came to our elite clinics. We watched them play in high school. They played other sports and that was great too. So it's just not a necessary thing. And I think families, especially if they've never gone through the process before, they feel like they have to, or they're falling behind, or they feel like they want to give their child the best shot at succeeding. But I don't actually think those things move the needle. So I wish that stuff would be out. There would be a cap on how much you could charge families to go to games. There should be a cap on how much you're charging teams. They shouldn't make teams stay at local hotels. Like it's just been commercialized when the whole goal for players getting recruited is to find the right collegiate fit. And I don't think that commercialization is really doing that service for those student athletes. I think they could do it without that.
If we could put it on a t-shirt, we'd put it on a t-shirt, but that might be too many words. But yes, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to start this podcast was to give like that type of information just completely for free. Like I'm talking to a lot of different people, but mostly college coaches about the process. Like they're telling you exactly what they want, what they need from you in order to be recruited. Yes, there needs to be a certain level of skill, right? You have to be good enough. It is your process, and coaches are going to expect you to be self-advocates, especially once you step on campus day one.
Yeah.
So I love that. Love what you said. Let's get you in charge of AAU. Is there anything you want to plug or anything else? Maybe, I don't know, if people are interested in McDaniel, where can they, find out more about it?
Yeah, if they want to check us out. So we're pretty active on social media. It's at McDaniel_WBB. And that's our handle for Instagram and Twitter. So if you want to check that out, Instagram is probably the best, most engaging platform we have. My sister runs that. She's awesome. So plug Coach Maggie. So she does a great job, but you can see any of our upcoming camps, clinics are on there, and any events that we're going to, you can check that out as well. So that's the best way to connect. If you wanted to reach out, my email is cgowan@mcdaniel.edu. So you can always reach out to me as well. But if you are interested in playing at the next level, shoot me your schedule and we'll try to catch a game this summer.
All right, cool. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes as well. But Coach, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you aren't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the podcast so you can get updated once new episodes are dropped. If you're a fan of the show, go ahead and leave a review. It really helps spread the word to more athletes, parents, and coaches. Now, if you have any questions for myself or future guests, feedback, or you're curious on how we can work together to help you reach your basketball goals, let's have a conversation. Feel free to email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com today to set that up. That's EL@HOOPSTHROUGHLIFE.com. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.